Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzi Hammer, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Join us as we explore the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding AI, blockchain, and more. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game. Today in our show, we have a very special guest. Jonathan Caras is a serial entrepreneur and has been a prominent member of the crypto community since 2016. He spearheaded numerous DAOs, ran a crypto hedge fund through 30x growth, and spent 2 years running business development for Starkware. His current venture, a permissionless leverage trading platform, is called Levana, an acronym for Leverage Any Asset. I've had the incredible good fortune of being able to work with Jonathan a little on Levana and witness firsthand his brilliance and his enthusiasm, not just for blockchain, but for emerging technologies on a whole. One of the things that continues to stand out for me about Jonathan, besides for his brilliance, is his persona. Jonathan is what my grandmother would call an Ubermensch. He's a really solid guy and an incredibly good person. His ethics and his morals are unwavering, and that's why I think he's a great first candidate for this show, because part of what we're going to talk about today is ethics and morals. Let's jump right in. Jonathan, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And you're not so bad yourself. It's been a pleasure. It's been mutually satisfying to work with you as well.
Thank you. I'm blushing. I actually did deep dived into you, did like a Google search and found an article that you wrote in 2016, or what it was called right now.
Oh, the Genie in the Machine. Where did you even find that?
Yes. The Genie in the Machine, which I thought was a really appropriate place to start for two reasons. First of all, it's just kind of freaky how this is 2016 and you're talking about how robots are at some point in the future going to take over our world. We're going to have personal robots that we talk to in our house that do various things for us. And this has all come into fruition much quicker than we thought. The approach that you encourage people to take on these new technologies was one which I thought was really interesting. Basically, rather than fighting these new emerging technologies that are going to come into your home inevitably, you might as well just change your approach to it, and it'll be a lot more fun. So name your Roomba, get comfortable with it. And I think it's a great point. Alexa is my kid's best friend. Like my daughter's third word was, Alexa, turn off the music. So it is inevitable, and these things have become part and parcel of our day-to-day lives. So definitely embracing them is an important thing to do. But they still raise a lot of really, really interesting questions. Chief among them would be privacy. We have these things that they're in our house. They see everything. They hear everything. How do we ensure that they maintain a certain level of privacy? What level of privacy do we want them to maintain? Another one is bias. Somebody was just telling me yesterday that he works in the industry of autonomous vehicles. And one of the big questions that they have there for the manufacturers is, what do we pitch to our drivers? Are we whose lives do we put more of a focus on saving? The driver above all, or is it the pedestrians, or do we have to take into account who the pedestrian is? If it's a child, do we save the child over the driver? So there's tons of questions that come into play when we're.
This is the classic trolley problem. The trolley problem is that you're standing at an impasse, a fork in the road, and there's a train that's coming. And if the train continues to go forward, the train will hit a large group of people, usually it's in the example of an order of magnitude more. So if you do nothing, the train will plow through and let's say end up killing 20 people. Why they're stuck on this track, it's not really important for the thought experiment. Now, if you pull the lever, thus adjusting the tracks to have it veer off to the side, then it will hit one person. So you will have, in this case, saved the lives of 19 people, but through an act of your own, you will have end up murdering one. So the question becomes, is that justified? Now, it seems like a ridiculous scenario, but we can actually use it by adjusting the variables to try and come to specific conclusions that really help define what is society, what are the responsibilities of society, what is my right as an individual to make a decision that how it will impact others. And so now we might say that, well, I wouldn't have the guts to pull that lever and move it from hitting the 20 people instead of killing the one. But what if it wasn't the number? What if it was 20 million? And you could save those 20 million by specifically condemning one person to death. So I think in most scenarios, um, we would um, we would say yes. And now, as soon as you can arrive through permutations of the trolley problem at a situation where you would say yes, so now we've created a framework that we can have ethical discussions about self-driving cars, about privacy, about national security, and things like that. Maybe we'll be able to prevent the next 9/11 through, assuming it wasn't an inside job. I don't personally think it was an inside job, but assuming that it wasn't, maybe we could prevent the next 9/11 or the next corona. And I'm not even sure what corona is. But the next calamity to face humanity through the withdrawal or subjugation of some of our innate human rights, like civil liberties or right to privacy, even to assume that there is such a thing, a right to privacy. So it almost reminds me of, in some cases, it's even hard to start conversations around these topics. And so you have to start with that framework. And it kind of takes me back to like somewhat of a rather crude, I forget who this was attributed to. It's like, it's like the gentleman asked the lady if she would sleep with him for $1 million, and she says, well, for $1 million, yes. And he says, well, what about $100? And he says, well, and she says, well, what kind of a lady do you think I am? And he says, well, we already established what kind of lady you are. Now we're just haggling over the price. So I think that once we can come to terms that there is a non-absolute in terms of the roles that privacy and ethics and safety measures, that there aren't absolutes in these things, that it's about society to find where our comfort lies. So then is when we can kind of peel away and try and address, what responsibilities do we have to keep to ourselves and what can we give over to artificial intelligence in the future.
So you're saying we need to backtrack and make certain determinations about these fundamentals at their core. And only once we have a better understanding of how we want to approach them from a human perspective can we kind of hand them over to the AI and let the AI make its own distinctions. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Like, do we want to hard code it in that to a Tesla that is it? I guess I'm giving. We want to ask the first question: is
what choices do we want to give to our AIs?
Exactly.
That's the first thing that we have to tackle, and I think that everybody's kind of scared to make that determination because, in the end of the day, whatever the machine decides, they're going to look back to those first humans who programmed the machine into making those determinations and say, "Well, you swayed it in this direction."
Well, I think that there's going to be enough of a gap. Like there will be an AI that ends up, God forbid, murdering a child, or that ends up resulting in a child's death. It's inevitable. Whether or not it's already happened and we just don't know about it is unclear. But there will be where an autonomous vehicle swerved out of the way so that it didn't have a fender bender and ends up killing a little kid on a trikey. It's heartbreaking, but it's inevitable. And then the question will come is that who will be responsible for that? Was it the driver? Was it the creator of the autonomous vehicle? Was it the parents of the kid that weren't watching them and the kid got out onto the street? Was it the guy in front that slammed on his brakes? And everybody's going to kind of want to pass the buck. And I think that that in terms of responsibility, that I suspect that the creators of the AI of the autonomous vehicles will figure out a way that they're not the ones responsible for this. because I think that it's going to be very hard to advance at the rate that this technology is advancing, where they're constantly on the line. So I think that it's I suspect that it will always end up being on the driver and not on the programmer. But that's just pure speculation.
Well, I think that's where it actually gets really interesting because it depends what the AI is set out to do. Right now, with things like ChatGPT or Midjourney, where everybody wants to put their hands on the output and say, this is mine. So then the developers are going to say, okay, we're going to retain as much control as possible and as much ownership as possible on the output of the AI. But I think everybody could agree that ChatGPT and Midjourney aren't killing anybody. Where the stakes are higher.
Well, that I disagree with that. They could kill. They can, like, let's say, for example, about their impact to sway social issues. You could argue that that as Bing uses ChatGPT for search results, and then Facebook will have their Llama, which they just announced, and whatever Google is doing, I'm not sure, but they're moving kind of slow with it. But at some point, we're going to be able to sway elections the same way that social media can be used to manipulate who comes into office. I think AI will have an even stronger ability to manipulate who comes into office, because it's going to literally teach people how to think. And in many cases, I think that that people will view the opinions of AI higher regards than they'll view a certain pundit or social media influencer. And so through that, you could get things like issues of abortion and and refugee status that AI directly is responsible for saving or ending the lives of large groups of people.
Right, so you're looking like a few steps down the line, because for me, somebody who has already integrated ChatGPT in my day to day, I love using it. I think it's a really, really powerful tool. But one of the things that I noted right away is that it's not truthful. And I think even Elon Musk tweeted last week, we need a truth GPT.
I mean, it's also like 6 months old.
Right. So I can understand and appreciate what it is capable of and what it is good at doing, what it's not good at doing. But somebody else who might not be as familiar or might not even know that what they're talking to is an AI and might think it's a customer service representative or whatever, might attribute full truth to whoever it is that they're speaking to. So I was actually reading an article this morning by somebody, I don't even actually know who he is. Maybe you know him. His name is Alon Steinbeck. And he put together an article where ChatGPT interviewed itself on its own ethical implications. And what he highlighted as the major issue with AI was the risk of it being used to spread misinformation. So somebody who is engaging with an AI and doesn't know necessarily that they're engaging with an AI, the AI is not truthful by default, and anybody who would give it more credence than it should might assume that because it's so smart and so quick and so human-like that it's also truthful, and that misinformation will be used to create social bias,
and that it's like omniscient.
And I could see how somebody would think that it's almost godlike in its speed, in its accuracy, in everything, but its lack of truthfulness, because ultimately it's drawing on big data that hasn't been appropriately aggregated. Maybe if we're talking about self-trained AIs, for example, the medical sector or the legal sector, where it's being fed with truths, and then it's drawing on those truths to derive the output, then there might be a basis for attributing some level of truthfulness to it. But as it stands right now, it's not truthful at all.
Or in many cases, there also can be a bias, like a political bias, where and this again, you see it. I think it's nothing new. I think that it's just like search results on steroids. If every time that you do a search result for a political candidate from one sector of the political landscape, you might only get negative toned results, and then if you were to view his competitor, you would only get positive toned results. And so someone who's really coming and just looking to learn more about the views of the various different politicians to determine who they should elect, it creates a bias. And then I think at some point, down the road, I can imagine an AI petitioning to just run for office itself. But that, I think, will get laughed at if you mention that in most circles.
Yeah, but it's not even that funny. I mean, I think we've already seen an AI lawyer who is trying somebody in court. I think there's maybe even been an AI judge.
Yeah, and I think surgeons, and I've been investing in a smart house, like building out elements of a smart house, really going back from 2013, 2014. And then it was through some of my frustrations and kind of looking at the vision as to where is this going in 10 years that I wrote that initial article. I think it was published for some university I was asked. But when it comes to AI being fed specific information. One of the great things that we'll have, given the fact that we live in a digital age and that so much of our life is being digitally recorded, from all of our tweets to all of our WhatsApp messages, to all of our posts on social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc., that this becomes an ample amount of data that can be used, fed into an AI learning model, or an AI Turing complete chatbot that then can effectively emulate the thoughts and mannerisms and persona of individuals. And I see a natural implementation of this is in relationship management, whether it's a completely fictitious relationship management, like people having significant others that are AI and not real humans, or being able to experience interaction with a historical figure that is, no longer alive or just inaccessible, and even being able to interact with loved ones that have passed away. So I anticipate that there will be a huge industry of where you will be able to purchase a bot of a loved one, and it could be historical, and you'll be able to purchase a bot of someone that you've never met. Like, you can virtually date. I'm not even going to say it right. Ariana Grande, is that how you pronounce her name? And it will have all of her social media content to really be able to create a very compelling kind of fictitious role play where you have a relationship with this person. It's just inevitable because technology always scales things that don't scale, and relationships are things by nature that don't scale. We can't all date, a certain person. We can't all sit down with Abraham Lincoln and talk to him. Actually, none of us can. I guess I don't know anybody that can. And so these are things that are going to be relevant. And then also you get into different situations. That what happens when upgrades to the various AI engines underneath these data sets drastically change your, dead grandfather's persona that you grew up on. Like, I learned a massive amount of knowledge from my father. He was always, he was a bookworm. He watched Jeopardy every night. He watched the news every night. We sat there, learning about, like, I remember being 10 years old and having conversations about political science with him. And it always had a certain kind of libertarian view to it, which I think I inherited myself. But if there was, I look at my own children and the fact that, I live in the Middle East, and my parents live in North America, and that there's a major loss that they can't grow up learning, kind of sitting on the knee and learning the same things from my father, like I learned from him. And then subsequently, their children will be even farther removed, and especially as the descendants of people that died in the Holocaust, or either survived the Holocaust / died in the Holocaust. There's stories that I've heard and conversations that I've had with Holocaust survivors that are so valuable to understanding humanity, and especially as a Jew, creating a Jewish identity. And so I see that there will be a time where people will go to Holocaust museums, and there will be holograms of people that were in the Warsaw Ghetto, or people that went through Auschwitz, and you will be able to interview them and talk to them. And the information that is used as the base model is going to be information that was publicly collected, and it may not reflect one person, the memories of one person. It may reflect the memories of many people. As a kid, I always imagined, what is the technology that's going to be enabled through the creation of a Turing complete computer? And this was a path that I was always very bullish on, that there's strong product market fit and massive ability for revenue generation. but obviously there's a lot of ethics involved in there and a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it brings to mind two things. The first is Black Mirror. Do you watch Black Mirror?
A little bit, but it gives me nightmares. It's hard to watch.
um, it definitely gives me nightmares, but it also gets me thinking because all these things that you just mentioned, I mean, I feel like Black Mirror is just anticipating what's to come in the next, I don't know, decade.
I mean, I pull it off from Twilight Zone. I watched basically every episode of the 1960s and 70s Twilight Zone. So I'm assuming there's a lot drawn from there.
Yeah, so this is just a later stage Twilight Zone. So there's this great Black Mirror episode where this girl and her boyfriend are in a terrible car crash and he dies and it's devastating. And she misses him so much, so she hears about this hotline from a friend where she could dial in and speak to an AI who effectively replicates his persona based on all the data available on him from Twitter and Facebook and whatnot. And she keeps dialing in and calling and speaking to this chatbot. And at some point, it's just not enough for her. And she gets in touch with the customer service. And then the customer service rep is like,
I was going to talk to you about that, actually.
What do you mean?
There's another level to this available, so to speak. Kind of experimental, and I won't lie, it's not cheap.
What is it?
Are you sitting down? This might sound a bit creepy.
and then he lays down for her this product that's actually very similar to the one that you've been talking about. He tells her, I'm going to send you a box. And the next day, this box shows up at her house, and she opens it up, and there's like this mangled form of a body inside. And she takes out the body, and she has to put it in a bathtub, and she has to wait 24 hours. And after 24 hours, this clone is born. And, you know, obviously it doesn't have a heart or a soul. It's an AI bot that's, again, replicated based on the data that we had available, all of his social media posts and articles and pictures. But it's almost an exact replica of who the human being was, who the boyfriend was. And over the course of like a decade and a half, she and her daughter grow very close to this AI bot replica clone thing. And at some point, they have to make a decision of, what do we do with it? Does it have a soul? Does it have feelings? Should it have feelings? Can it have feelings? Can we just shut it off? Can we replace its battery? You know, and these are real questions that we're going to have to deal with in this new age that we're entering into. But you have to watch it because it's exactly what you were talking about. And the other thing that it brings to mind, a number of years ago, I was approached by this guy by the name of Karim Ben Khalifa. He was putting together a program for MIT that would showcase the viewpoints of two sides of various international conflicts. And one of them was the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I was asked to come in my IDF uniform to an apartment in Tel Aviv where I was scanned using one of those scanners that you use for the Xbox, actually. And I was avatarized in my uniform, and I was scripted saying my view of the conflict. And the idea was that on the other side of the room, there would be a Hamas terrorist who would give his narrative, and you'd put on these VR glasses and you'd walk to different sides of the room and you'd approach different representatives of the various viewpoints of the conflict, and you'd get to hear firsthand from a Hamas terrorist in his garb or an IDF soldier in his garb what his view of the conflict was. And at the time, I mean, this was at least 10 years ago, the technology wasn't developed beyond being able to approach an avatar and hear from it. But now, if you integrate AI into the avatar's image, I'm sure it would be able to draw on their experiences and create an actual form of a dialogue that you could conduct between yourself and the avatar. So these things are really, really developing at lightning pace, and they're presenting some really, really interesting issues.
Well, I think that this can also be in therapy. Is that imagine, that you have trauma from, that you want to get through. I think that the AI and simulations, I mean, they already do it post-trauma, where they put, soldiers in situations with VR goggles, and they have the smell of the smoke or the burning tires, and they have the sounds of the gunshots and stuff, and it's called like displacement therapy, if I'm not mistaken, where you try and help work them through certain experiences. And I think that many of the traumatic experiences that we have in our life are directly related to other human beings. And so lowering the cost of barrier from a tech perspective and increasing the quality of being able to simulate those experiences with any human being, I assume will have a lot of practical implementations within the world of therapy.
I think DBT is where if you're scared of a lion, so then you expose the person to a lion, and then by being exposed to your greatest fears, you somewhat overcome them. So, in this instance, it would be just whatever trauma you were inflicted with, emerging yourself in that trauma.
Yeah, I have a good friend whose son is afraid of hair conditioner. It's a tactile thing, and so they had to start with just putting a bottle of conditioner on the counter, and he had to be comfortable getting in the room, and then having the lid open so he could smell it, and then putting it on
I
his
can't
skin, and
imagine.
then and it was like a whole process of essentially getting desensitized to something that you're arguably overly sensitized to.
I feel like you could live without being exposed to hair conditioner. No,
I didn't ask. I didn't really get into the details. I just thought that the approach from the psychologist was fascinating. But I can imagine this is that again, it's going back to kind of combining it with the loss of a loved one. But like, let's say that a lot of your trauma is because of poor, things that happened, whether it was abuse or just poor relationships, like with your parents, and your parents have passed on. So being able to simulate a relationship with them, and being able to work through that with a therapist in a virtual environment with a persona of this family member may have practical applications. And again, I'm not a therapist, so it could be that therapists are listening to this and they're like, "That's a terrible idea." But I suspect that somebody will figure out how to do it correctly. Yeah.
Okay, so what about crypto? We talked a lot about AI, but you're an OG crypto entrepreneur. I'm curious to hear what you think are the big glaring ethical issues that are raised by crypto and blockchain, and how AI maybe fits into all that as well.
Well, I think that there will come a time soon, and soon I mean in the next, let's say anything in the next 20 years, I consider as soon, but it could be sooner than that. So, humanity's perspective, like 20 years is like you sneeze, and 20 years has gone by. And it's enough for a soldier to come home from war, have a baby, and then that person to go out to the next generation's war. So it's often called a generation. And so there will be a business that is created by AI that that collects fees in cryptocurrency, because it's a permissionless way to create your own bank account that's self-custodied, and then to be able to charge people for a service, and then receive receive that payment without the need of a trusted intermediary. So I believe that AI will use cryptocurrency to create businesses, and that then they use that funding to improve their software, whether it's to hire third parties, humans or other AI, to write better software for them, and that they will succeed at creating this positive flywheel where there's an AI that was entirely thought of by business there's a business that's entirely contemplated by AI, designed by AI, launched by AI, collects revenue in cryptocurrency, and then uses that cryptocurrency to reinvest back into its business to to create it better. And then now this is where you come into the problem of like the paperclip factory. I don't know if you're familiar with that thought experiment of that they like the multivac operators, which is a reference to 1930s or 40s sci-fi. They create an AI that they give it the task of creating the most amount of paper clips at the cheapest cost. So at first it starts just looking at like how to optimize employees. The employees that are doing poorly, it fires and then hires new ones. Then it realizes, what, the humans in general aren't very good at this, so it replaces all the humans with AI working at the paperclip factory. Then it realizes, if we actually were much closer to the quarry of where the actual metal comes from, that would lower the cost. And then, if we had our own power plant, so it takes over the power plant. And then, you fast forward in the story now, the entire world is enslaved by robots, and all resources of humanity are being used to create paperclips because of this very successful AI that was given a very specific task of making paperclips. So it's a conversation ad absurdum, which is designed, to just show some of the flaws of not having a big red button that can stop things, or of just having any situation, that it might say, oh, if I did a nuclear attack on Russia, then the price of paperclips would go up 10x. So that's going to optimize profits. So therefore, I should hack into the Minutemen silos and then launch an attack on Russia to increase the price of my paperclips. So it's absurd, but it's designed to give a demonstration. So I think that going back to the question about crypto, crypto's strongest value add is the ability to be able to transfer verified digital assets, but trustlessly between different market participants. So in the case of Bitcoin, I can secure the Bitcoin network by being a miner, and I can receive Bitcoin from doing that. I can own Bitcoin and receive it as my business. I might, as a form of payment or means of exchange. You might be an investor in Bitcoin, and so you want to accumulate it over time. So all of us, with our own different elements in the network, we can all work together, and nobody can tell us that we can't participate. So we don't need to get permission from anyone to be able to be a different actor within the system. And that's why it's all run by code. So that's why it's particularly relevant for AI. And to answer the other question that you asked, which is what are the elements where ethics come into a role, is that humans as a species are predominantly animalistic in nature, meaning that there's different pulling from some Jewish thought, which I think is also shared in many other schools of either religion or philosophy or spirituality, is that humans have both an evil inclination and a positive inclination, and that the way that the world is built is that we receive much more immediate feedback loops from serving our animalistic nature. And so because of that, we end up with a world that where we have concepts like might makes right, or where if I take advantage of somebody else to my own benefit, that ends up being a good thing. So, we've got things like late stage capitalism. We have things like, the big lie, that if I say something long enough, then it becomes true. That Nazism was legal and ethical within the scope of pre World War II Germany, and so I think that having something that's just completely permissionless ends up attracting a lot of the negative aspects of humanity. And we get a bunch of garbage. We get a bunch of scams within crypto. We get a bunch of misinformation within crypto. We get a bunch. We're incentivizing those that focus on value creation through abuse or of one form or another, are naturally attracted to permissionless areas, which crypto is the epitome of. And so, because of that, if North Korea is going to write a virus, that virus is going to accept Bitcoin if it's going to be a ransom virus. If there's going to be, some type of a scam of like a Ponzi scheme created today, it's going to leverage, the smart contracts of Ethereum in order to make the most effective Ponzi scheme possible, et cetera. And so I don't think that the answer is censorship, but I think that the answer is probably segregation, um, self verification within certain circles. Like you have things like CoinMarketCap, which will try and identify between a legitimate project or a scam project. You'll have dashboards like Token Terminal that will help the average person be able to see whether or not rewards are coming through some type of inflation, or which can be considered a Ponzi, or they're coming through some type of a real yield of paying customers, and now they're being reallocated. So I think the natural course of crypto is that the majority of it will always be unethical, but the value that's created by the small amount that's not unethical, I think, justifies its existence.
I like that. So, as an entrepreneur and as a builder of a leverage trading platform, and given that everybody's kind of searching for those small amount of ethical or ethically driven products within a space that's saturated with bad actors, how will Levana stand out? How will Levana be more secure, more ethical, more safe?
Well, I think that the goal is around transparency more than anything else, meaning that it's very important to make sure that the risks that are associated with trading leverage are well known. I think that a system should be designed in all way possible that it can prevent insolvency, meaning what if you like, let's look at the Immortal bucket shop from like the 1930s. These were places where they might be on the corner street, in a bodega or the equivalent today, where a person could come and just get either spot or leverage exposure to a commodity or a security within the general early American post World War One booming economy, or post Depression economy. And so what would happen with these bucket shops is that they did well, just like any casino, if the house was winning, because the house can always reinvest back into marketing. They can always have nice carpets. My father would say is, if you ever go to a casino, look down at the carpet and ask yourself who paid for that carpet to be lined and shampooed. It was you walking through the casino. And so as long as the house wins, these bucket shops can stay in business. But as soon as there is a run, a significant run in either one direction or another, that's relatively homogenous from the eyes of the speculators. Like Bitcoin, just ran, like if we look back to last year, when Bitcoin ran from 20K to 30K, and the market sentiment was exuberant. I don't know if that's how you pronounce the word, but was very positive. So then the general consensus was, okay, this baby is running to 60K. And so everybody went long. And if you went long on certain platforms that were under collateralized, then it became a bank run. Is that the only people that could get out, that the actual cash that they were entitled to was the first people that exited. And then once the house is broke, so to speak, so then everybody else is held with a ticket stub for an empty bag. And I think that method of creating really paper trading around leverage is immoral and unethical, and has been a lot of the backbone of the blowups that we've seen in the crypto ecosystem, where FTX gives a credit line to Alameda, and Alameda gives a credit line to Three Arrow Capital. I don't know if they actually did that, or and then they give a credit line to Genesis. Again, I have no idea if they actually did that. I'm just making up names here. I don't mean to badmouth anybody. And then they do it to, Digital Coin Group, and then they do it to BlockFi and to Voyager. And so everybody thinks that the market cap is around 10 times what it really is, because the same dollar has actually been counted on about 15 different people's balance sheets. And so now, as soon as that creates the bank run, that there's so much leverage in the ecosystem that's under collateralized, that as soon as people get weak hands and they want to start cashing out, so then it creates this massive crash, because now everybody's got to sell speculative assets, or default and go bankrupt, and then it becomes a race to who's going to close their account down the fastest. And that's what we saw, with, I think it was over $100 billion of let's call it vapor value disappeared in the crypto market. $100 billion, again, don't quote me on that number, disappeared from just under collateralized leverage. And so the idea of Levana is to create a transparent, on-chain, fully collateralized, cost-effective, modular leverage trading platform that allows for people to use one of the most valuable and versatile financial tools, which is leverage, which in many cases can be used for market neutral strategies, or for hedging, or for very other things other than just becoming a degen and like going 100x long on Dogecoin. Not the Levana doesn't support Dogecoin, it doesn't support 100x leverage, but just giving that as an example. So I think that that's really where the ethics and the mission, the value drivers, and the mission statement comes in, is saying, how can we create something that solves, that provides for the natural usage and usefulness of leverage exposure, which has a lot of legitimate use cases. How do we do it in a permissionless way? How do we do it in a cost-effective way? And how do we do it while reducing the risks that have been associated with previous encounters that blew up the whole market? And how do we do it via increased transparency, so that everybody can actually see all the mechanics in the system and how the actual capital flows?
All right. I'm bullish on Levana and where it's going. I think that you guys are going to be a light unto the nations, in a sense, in an industry, like we said, that's so heavily saturated with bad actors. Somebody with a steady moral compass is much needed.
Well, it's hard. You always are in a situation, but you're always in a situation where you can't make everybody happy. So a big part of trying to be a good actor, and I don't propose that I am a good actor. I aspire to be a good actor, but part of it is always being faced with the trolley problem in this industry, is that there's always gonna, in many cases, you're never going to be able to make everybody happy with either decisions that you make or how design, how infrastructure is designed, or any of that. And so you always are faced a little bit with how do I make the most amount of people the most amount of happy, or inversely, the least amount of people, or the most amount of people the least amount of unhappy, or everybody kind of lukewarm. If you can get everybody kind of lukewarm, then at least you're better than most projects.
Yes, that's so Jewish of you. Always want to make everybody happy. I got to just say one more thing, and if this is something that you don't feel comfortable talking about, just let me know. But I recently saw that you were interviewed, and one of the questions that the interviewer asked you at the end was, and I don't know if everybody in the audience knows this about you, I actually didn't mention in the intro, but you were one of the members of the LFG.
Yeah, the Luna Foundation Guard.
And you had an opportunity to really sit at the, you had a front row seat through the rise of Luna and also through the fall. And I think you also took a heavy personal hit from, both on Levana, which was heavily invested in the Luna ecosystem initially before you migrated to Cosmos. And also personally, I think you were invested in quite a few companies or ventures on Luna. And you have every right to, hate Do Kwon. But I recently saw in an interview that somebody asked you, if you could talk to Do now, what would you say to him? And, what was going through my mind was like, you bastard or whatever. But you said, I would ask him how his family is doing and how we could help him through this trying time. and I thought like, wow, to be able to see through your own personal issues and through, all the anger that I'm sure a lot of people, but you especially, have towards this guy. You were just thinking like how his family is taking it all, and how you could help him, how we could help him.
Well, I don't think he was.
Where does that come from? That ability to
but it's
just care for
no,
somebody
it's not
else at that level.
You don't you grandize it. It's very simple. I think that the risks that were the mistake that was made at Terra was probably around clarifying the risks to a retail audience. When you talk about stablecoins, a lot of people don't put two and two together, that if there's a big enough bank run, if there's a big enough shock to the system, then the whole thing can collapse, and that what you thought was worth $1 really can go down to zero.
No, but what you're alleging is that everybody is somewhat ignorant, and that's not the case, because you were, like I said, in the front row, and you're not ignorant, and you knew what the risks were, and you're still exposed.
Yes, I thought that it was going to work. I thought that we were going to build I thought that we were going to transition from a fully algorithmic stablecoin to a large enough basket of goods to be able to weather future attacks. And that wasn't the case. I was wrong, and it cost me more than you can imagine on many different fronts. But I don't believe that I don't believe that it was through malice from Doe's perspective. If anything, I think it probably was just poor modeling, and poor, maybe hubris, maybe not taking seriously the predictions or attack vectors that were presented. But I don't believe that it's. I don't believe in a Doe-led conspiracy, and so because of that, I can say, look, this guy is in a position that I wouldn't want to be in. That he's hiding somewhere in Eastern Europe, and he's got a baby. She's like 1 year old. He's got a wife, and he's got lots of people that wish that he was dead. And God forbid any of that should come to fruition. Anything, I don't think that he deserves bad things to happen to him. Because of because of how he tweeted to people, and various other actions. So I guess that's where it comes from. And I've enjoyed pretty much all of my conversations with Doe in the past. And I suspect that I'll talk to him again in the future. And then hopefully it'll be a positive one as well.
I love your optimism and I love your empathy. Both things which I think AIs cannot have. Empathy and optimism.
Well, not real, but I think they could probably do a better job of simulating it than most of us can do expressing it.
Right, but in the end, real emotions come down to having real emotions. You can't mimic compassion.
It's true, but you have no idea if I am real. And you will never be able to tell if I am real. You have no idea if you could be the only sentient creature in the whole universe.
I don't agree.
You could. You could.
No, human beings are built in such a way that we have hearts. In every good movie, the way you break through to the bad guy is appealing to his sensitive side, be it through his mother,
I know,
through his
but
kids.
All of this could be a simulation. This all could be a simulation. None of this could be real. You could be the only actual living thing that exists. You could be just like a few cells, in some petri dish somewhere, experiencing all of reality around you. We just don't know. And it's okay that we don't know.
So we're seeing all your sides today. We saw your Jewish side, and now we're seeing your sci-fi geek side, where it's all one big lie.
No, it's all, in no, it's, I think that most of my metaphysical belief and stuff stems in, in
Religious
Jewish
belief.
philosophy. Yeah, but there's belief. And like one of the things that we say is that when the creator of the universe created the universe, well, that we say a few things. One is that nothing else exists besides him. And I don't want to get into a gender conversation. That's just how you speak. It's not, he doesn't have
It.
reproductive organs. Yeah. So not there is nothing else that exists besides him. And he created the world. The world lives within him. He is outside of time and space. And if he was to stop generating the world for even a moment, then the world would cease to exist. So the best analogy that we can come up with um, is that we are essentially like a dream that the creator of the universe is generating. And we say that like he's the knower, the knowing, and the knowing, and the known. So like it's almost like the way that I thought about it when I played Zelda, like on the NES, is that the universe is almost like a combination of the cartridge and the game console and the player, kind of like all in
I
one.
love this.
And that's what we're experiencing now. And then the fact that the universe isn't any that the creator is not changed from before creation to after creation. It makes, and there's nothing else besides the creator. Then in some essence, the world that we all live in right now, it doesn't really exist. Not like with an exist, like with a capital E. It is some type of a simulation. That doesn't make it less valuable. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be nice to each other. It just means that existence, with a capital E, is much, much bigger than the physical reality that we experience ourselves in. And that's also why, like, you can't, like, what is consciousness? Is consciousness something that is that requires biology to exist? I don't know, but I know you don't know either. And I think that will be a big debate. And I think that there will be a time, just given all of the stuff like with social upheaval, like every generation has some sin of their past that their children make amends for, and then they usually make amends by swinging the pendulum curve to the other end. So whether it was like in American culture, there was slavery and civil rights. There was, and then there was, equality with minorities, and then now there's the whole movement around homosexuality and redefining what genders are. And so each generation, we kind of have the sins of our previous generation that we throw away. So I am very confident that at some point, racism against silicon-based consciousness is going to be viewed the same way as bigotry against a biological male participating in a women's basketball league. Like the same how it's not appropriate to be judgmental at that transition. So it also won't be appropriate to judge someone for having a romantic relationship with a robot, or marrying a robot, or a town wanting to elect a robot as their leader. And it'll just be like the older generation that doesn't get it, that's born in bigotry, that has problems with it.
So we've gone full circle to people having emotional relationships with their AI, which is, I think, probably a good way to end. Thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. And, I'm looking forward to having more conversations like this in the future, perhaps. Anything, any last words for our audience?
I hope I didn't offend anybody, and none of this was financial advice.
Do your own research. Not financial advice, not legal advice. I think I'm going to change the podcast to do your DYOR, NFA, NLA. Yeah, definitely.
And then a rocket ship with a chart, and then like crashing, because well, thank you. This was a lot of fun. And if you wanna contact me, my DMs are open. You can find me on Twitter or on Telegram at Madcaps Laugh, MADCAPS Slaughh. That's a Pink Floyd reference with a slight misspelling. And if you want to follow Levana, it's Levana_protocol on Twitter.
Yes, so definitely follow Levana and follow Jonathan. Lots of fun, lots of alpha. And this has been a great episode. Looking forward to the next one. Make sure to subscribe and tune in for future episodes. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.